A Tarrant County teenager was convicted of murder this morning for his role in a deadly home invasion robbery. 19-year-old Tamar McIntyre goes by the name Tay-K 47 in his online rap videos. He was convicted for his role in the shooting death of 21-year-old Ethan Walker in 2016.
Tay-K started his rap career as a teenager as part of the crew Daytona Boys with his childhood friends Pimps and Santana Sage. The Santana Boys got to chasing that rap game bag throughout 2014 and 15, releasing their song Drift, which included Tay-K's very first verse.
Tay-K at the cut, pretty eager for action. Wacky with the Peyton, now you look like a catfish. The rims on my NASCAR sparkle their classics. I need a new strap, let me hit my blacksmith. Coughing on the tropic, but she said it's attractive. Trap boy living, man, this shit is fantastic. This shit is underground, but it's not rap faction. I'm really not with the acting.
It's all very YNWB slime, isn't it? And from there in 2015, he released his first solo track, the Back to the Future inspired Biff Zanin, and followed that up with the track Sly Cooper. And as the Daytona Boys kept pushing their music and trying to build a buzz, they started playing shows around the Arlington area of Texas. However, after a Daytona Boys show on New Year's Eve of 2016, Tay-K would be implicated in his first murder case that would see the Daytona Boys broken up. After performing at this New Year's bash, the Daytona Boys left the show in a car along with two other unidentified people. And whilst at a red light, the Daytona Boys spotted another car with 4 people in it that had also been to the same party. 2 men and 2 women, with the car being driven by 20-year-old college student Sarah Muchlechner. The Daytona Boys rolled down the window and started shouting sexual advances at the women in that car. Well, apparently those charming seduction attempts were deflected by the inhabitants of that car, and one of the male passengers in that vehicle rolled down his window and told the Daytona Boys that he would beat them up. At this point, the driver of that car, Daytona Boy Santana Sage, pulled out a pistol and fired 2 shots. One bullet struck Sarah in the head, killing her and causing her car to crash off of the road.
Investigators say the suspect in the murder of a UNT college student was arrested on his way to work at the Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma, Arizona. Eric Johnson is charged with murder for the death of 20-year-old Sarah Muchlechner. She was shot in the head during a drive-by shooting after a New Year's Eve party in Denton.
Within days, Santana Sage, real name Eric Johnson, was arrested for murder, and both Tay-K and Pimps were identified as having been in the car but weren't implicated in the murder because they were minors.
Police say they've now identified the other 4 people who were in this 2007 Honda Pilot New Year's morning when UNT student Sarah Muchlechner was shot in the head after a verbal altercation on the road between people in her car and those with Johnson. For now, the others with him not facing charges.
And things weren't looking good for Santana Sage, because before the trial had even begun, a damning DM had leaked from one of his friends, essentially admitting that Santana had done this, saying that Sarah was in the wrong place at the wrong time and Santana was already fired up from having beaten somebody up that same evening. Shout out to College Kid on YouTube for the great reporting on this case, by the way. Ultimately, Santana Sage was convicted after pleading not guilty and running with a pretty shoddy version of events. He admitted to firing at that car but said that he was only trying to scare them after they called him a homophobic slur, saying that he really didn't mean to kill anyone.
Johnson testified that a question from his SUV, "Where's the next party?" was answered by gay and racial slurs that someone yelled, "How'd you like to get shot?" Johnson testified he displayed his gun, admitted he fired 2 shots, but that he meant only to frighten, to shoot over the car, not to kill anyone. Muchlechner was shot in the head and the car crashed into a pole.
Is that the unanimous verdict of each and every one of the 12 jurors? Yes, Your Honor. If you would please hand that to the bailiff.
Defense attorneys argued Johnson's actions deserved a verdict of manslaughter, but the jury did not agree.
Well, the jury didn't buy it, and he ended up getting 44 years.
44 years. That's the sentence that was handed down today to a Marine who was convicted of killing a UNT student.
So let's take stock for a second. Tay-K and Pimps are only around 15, 16. They've already seen one of their best friends shoot an innocent woman dead in the head in a drive-by shooting with absolutely no personal consequences to them. It's pretty much no wonder that they would go on from this to get in a lot of trouble. So it's this situation that sets the stage for a caper that would leave Tay-K and 6 other people short of literally hundreds of years of their young lives and a man dead. On July 26, 2016, Tay-K and 6 other people had plotted to rob a man named Zachary Belote of drugs and money. The robbery was set to go down at a house in 1500 block in Aspen Court of Mansfield, Texas. And supposedly this was a trap house, and police do have record of several drug-related incidents having gone down at this address. And this entire plan was masterminded by an unnamed girl who was only 16 years old, supposedly dating Zachary Belote and staying at the property with him. Now the plan was she would invite 2 other women over to the house under the guise guise of smoking weed with Zachary Belote and seducing him. Now, I've been fucked over by some women in my time, but that has got to take the cake. And this allegedly wasn't even the first time she tried to set him up. Story goes she'd actually invited girls there to slyly steal shit from Belote before, but they'd not pulled it off. And they'd even planned to hit a lick in this house earlier on that day, but they'd called it off because there were too many people in the crib. But later on that night, those three girls were there again and the robbery was going ahead. And at some point in the evening, all those girls begun to act kind of strange, pacing around the house and constantly leaving the room to get water. These thoughts are the wrong kind of thirsty. And story goes they were all in a group chat with Tay-K and his boys, and at some point used the phrase hit a lick and it's a go. The girls then unlocked the door and allowed 4 men in to rob the stash. That 4-man crew included the 2 remaining Daytona boys, Tay-K and Pimps, along with 2 older men, Lotharian Merritt and Sean Robinson. I'm sorry, but there are so many people involved in hitting this lick, they probably would have had an 89-cent split if they'd have actually pulled it off. If you ask me, Tay-K should have just stuck to stealing shoelaces. Anyway, the crew were having some trouble finding the aforementioned stash and proceeded to stick up Zachary Belote and his roommate Ethan Walker, who was just chilling playing video games with his girlfriend, at gunpoint.
I seen 4 people come in with guns and masks and hoodies, and then they came straight into my room.
Apparently at this point, Tay-K was flipping over a couch shouting, "Where's the work?" That one surprised me. I mean, that couch must have been a lightweight futon, because this kid does not have the bone density to be flipping couches at his age. To be fair, I hear he's been lifting in jail. As tensions rose and stashes remained unrobbed, a confrontation took place between Lotharian Merritt and Sean Robinson and Zachary Belote and Ethan Walker. And apparently Sean Robinson, who was holding up Zachary Belote at gunpoint, put 2 hands on the gun and fired after being told there was no money.
Well, everybody left the room, and then one guy was at the front of my room in the doorway, and I was right in front of the bed, like pretty much point blank range. And he sat there and hesitated for about 2 minutes with one hand, and when he grabbed it with 2 hands, so I knew he was gonna pull the trigger.
And once shots started ringing, Lotharian Merritt shot an unarmed Ethan Walker in his bedroom in front of his girlfriend.
At first, he came around the corner and he said, "Get on the ground."
Okay.
I think he said it 2 or 3 times. Me and Ethan both responded and said, "There's nothing here." Ethan had his hands up and he got shot in the stomach.
As gunfire started, the rest of the robbery crew fled the apartment. Ethan Walker's gunshot wound would be fatal, and the police reported 1 injured and 1 dead. Now, it didn't take the cops long to put this case together, and Tay-K and his many co-defendants were charged with capital murder and placed on house arrest. And it turns out that trying 7 people for murder is actually quite a complicated process, especially considering the fact that several of the people involved were under 18. The murder happened on July of 2016, and Tay-K had been sitting at home on house arrest for 8 months when he finally snapped. On March 27th, 2017, he famously tweeted, "Fuck this house arrest shit, they gon' have to catch me on hood," showing a blatant disregard for the law as well as the basic rules of grammar. He duly cut off his ankle monitor and fled to San Antonio, where it seems like he actually did a little bit of extracurricular murdering there too. For the record, both that alleged murder and another case of Tay-K beating a man unconscious in a park are currently unresolved, so I'm not going to get into them. But just know they do not look good. But from there, he traveled onward to Elizabeth, New Jersey, where he was hiding out with friends and recording music. And it was here that he recorded the song and the music video for The Race. And in the lead up to the release of The Race, Tay-K's story was picking up steam, laying the foundations for his viral success to come later. On the 26th of June, the US Marshals released a picture and description suggesting that Tay-K was in the Fort Worth area of Texas. Tay-K must have had an inkling that the Marshals were truly closing in, because less than a week later, on the 30th of June, he was captured without incident.
Breaking news to share with you. We just learned 17-year-old Tamar McIntyre has been arrested in New Jersey by the U.S. Marshal Service.
And it was that same day that he was captured that he announced the release of The Race, posting its video on Twitter. The whole thing was incredibly orchestrated. I mean, posting the video on Twitter the exact day that he was arrested with the caption, "Feds can't hold me back, here it go." Interestingly, the US Marshals said that the arrest of Tay-K was based on tips pouring in from all over the country, as well as a local surveillance operation. And it's highly possible that as the legend around him and his music grew, so would the likelihood that he would be spotted by a member of the public and put in cuffs by police. And so, as Tay-K was getting hauled off to the slammer, The Race was going incredibly viral. Now, the music video for The Race was quite frankly brazen as fuck, showing him rapping in front of his own goddamn wanted poster. It had him toting Glocks and rapping in the hideout while his stupid friends poured Grey Goose on the floor behind him, as well as many shots of him doing his impressive gang signs. To be fair, if the ops don't find him, arthritis will. Considering its crazy backstory and its infectious beat and hook, it's no surprise that The Race ended up becoming an instant hit, debuting at number 70 on Billboard and then rising to its peak at number 44. The track was eventually certified platinum, and it was remixed and shouted out by some big hitters in the game, including Tyga, Fetty Wap, Lil Yachty, and everybody's favourite British rapper, 21 Savage. Childish Gambino even came out to say that he loved Tay-K, and even Travis Scott was tweeting the lyrics. And from there, both social and the fake news media continued to gobble it up.
His capture has almost boosted his popularity on social media. Twitter posts from fans now include the hashtag #FreeTay-K. There are t-shirts for sale for $35 to $45 with the same slogan.
Now, following his arrest and throughout the run-up to his trial, Tay-K exhibited some pretty strange behaviour. He unsuccessfully tried to finesse his way out of the slammer by saying that he'd taken a bunch of pills and was hearing voices. You ain't the only one, Tay-K.
I need to do more research. Maybe I am a culture vulture. Is Tay-K going to kill me? Why do they always break me?
But after a psychological evaluation showed that there was nothing wrong with him, he changed tact. He then attempted to organise himself so that he could capitalise on his newfound success, hiring Kodak Black's entertainment lawyer James McMillan to manage discussions with record labels and music publishers in an attempt to secure that bag so that he could pay for his legal fees. McMillan said he has this dire situation on his back, but this opportunity on the other hand. I'm tasked with trying to make sure that we maximise his opportunities so that he can mount as strong of a criminal defence as possible. Loosely translated, yes, he's facing a murder charge he probably won't beat, but there's a chance to hit one final lick, baby. Hey, we've all heard of ambulance chasers, but this guy's got to be the first bando chaser in the game. And to be fair, there was a lot to capitalise on. First off, Tay-K's debut mixtape Santana World dropped on July 18th. I assume it was named Santana World in order to honour his buddy Santana Sage that had shot that innocent girl in the head. Nice one. I'm sure no serious record industry person would get behind that, right? But in all fairness, as a project, it was a decent release, and in my opinion, the tracks I Love My Chopper and Murder She Wrote were truly compelling pieces of art. And off the back of that, by December, he was inking a deal with record label 88 Classic, a small indie label run by Senior Vice President of A&R at RCA Records, Jay Grand. It's interesting because it seems like a lot of effort was made to make it very clear that Tay-K wasn't affiliated or signed to RCA Records. You know, because of all the murders. It's not really good optics for the Sony-owned RCA Records to be profiting so directly from a horrible crime. But apparently Jay Grand is happy to. Look at him here, grinning like a man who truly doesn't care who has to die for him to get a hit record. Jay Grand really seems to have mastered the dark art of ghoulish A&R. In fact, I hear he doesn't find his new artists by scouring social media or going to local independent hip-hop shows, but instead just drives around rough areas listening to a police scanner, just itching to thrust an unfavourable record deal into the hands of any young gangbanger with a fresh rap sheet. After being in jail for several weeks, a hearing took place and the judge announced that Tay-K would be tried as an adult.
Tay-K, whose real name is Tamar McIntyre, appeared in a Tarrant County courtroom Wednesday wearing a red jumpsuit. A judge officially certified the 17-year-old controversial rapper to stand trial as an adult in the capital murder case.
His lawyer released a statement confirming this, suggesting that he was upbeat about proceedings. And initially, his lawyer was confident, emphasizing that there was no evidence that Tay-K had possessed weapons during the home invasion. And after hearing officers confirm this in testimony under oath, he was confident that Tay-K would be exonerated. Obviously, the judge denied bond, opting not to free Tay-K and admonishing any members of the public that had been banding around the Free Tay-K hashtag. And whilst he sat in jail, it had been rumoured that Tay-K may even be facing the death penalty. But his manager, Ezra Averill, denied this on Instagram. But trouble wasn't over, because whilst Tay-K did the wait, it seemed like he wasn't even able to stay out of trouble whilst in jail. Before long, Tay-K was whiling out in the jailhouse like a young Adebisi. Apparently in July, he struck another inmate and banged their head against the wall. Wow, even making bangers behind bars. He'd been accused of selling drugs and even smoking weed daily in jail. Jesus, can you imagine the paranoia? Most people I know are too scared to even go buy Cheetos when they're high, let alone fending off butt bandits in jail. And then making matters worse, he even got caught with a cell phone during a search. And after it got found, he attempted to toss it in the toilet and had a scuffle with a guard. And apparently he was even going around threatening guards, telling one, if I see you on the street, you better run. I know that sounds kind of scary, but to be fair, that guard has 55 years to get his stamina up. Anyway, these antics apparently got him moved from Tarrant County Jail to the maximum security Lon Evans Correction Center, where he spent some time in solitary confinement. But either he clearly didn't learn his lesson or his management literally care about nothing other than profiting off of his terrible crimes, because a month later, he managed to tweet an image of himself sitting in his jail cell. God damn, how did he get those invisible guns in there? Honestly, I just can't believe we've got people building careers as influencers from behind bars now. I swear, if we'd had Instagram in the 70s, Ted Bundy would have been doing prank videos from his cell. Then a picture of Tay-K wearing a suicide vest emerged, though his management downplayed this, suggesting that this was just something that he did in order to get himself out of solitary confinement. It's a good excuse, but I think a lot of people saw this for what it truly was. The hellish reality of a troubled young man who was at his lowest point in a terrible situation that he was unequipped to deal with. But he must have got a new lease on life, because by March 2019, it was reported that he was attempting to start his own gang in jail, which was called, I shit you not, the Rugrats. Prosecutors had said that they had even found a list of rules that Tay-K had drafted for people in the gang to abide by whilst behind bars. No snitching, no stealing from Rugrats, No disobeying higher ranking members. What is this, the Stonecutters? No harming children unless necessary. Ah, Chief, I wanted to harm children for fun. This ain't the gang for me. Love, respect, protect, and cherish your fellow Rugrats. I bet in jail that loving and cherishing gets a little butt sexy. There's apparently a ranking system and custom gang signs. We know how good he is at those. Sounds like a lot of these rules and conditions really benefit Tay-K. I bet you get bonus points if you're a rapper too. The gang's ranking system included sergeants, lieutenants, generals, troops, and the most prestigious rank of all, pickles. Honestly, this whole setup is so elaborate, I'm not sure whether it should be condemned for being evil or praised for being so entrepreneurial. Hey, maybe in 10 years time, Tay-K will be hosting The Prison Apprentice. For today's challenge, you'll both be split into 2 teams, and whoever can produce the best shiv gets the bottom bunk. Look, it's clear at this point that jail is not enough to stop Tay-K from committing crimes. I would personally propose a super jail, jail within a jail. Very popular in Russia, I believe. On February the 23rd, 2018, one of the female accomplices, described simply as a pretty petite blonde, who was only 16 at the time of the robbery and 17 at the time of sentencing, faced a judge. Apparently, she'd really tried to play the victim in court, saying that she was made to participate in the robbery under duress and had been the victim of human trafficking. But the judge weren't buying it, and she was found guilty of capital murder and aggravated robbery and duly sentenced to 20 years in the slammer. And supposedly, she was wiling out and screaming in court when being a thought trap goes wrong. Another female accomplice, Megan Holt, took a guilted plea on an aggravated robbery charge, avoiding the more serious capital murder charge and any possibility of the death penalty. And she agreed to testify against all of her codies in court, which convinced the judge to get subtracting that 40-year sentence down to 20. In May 2018, Lotharian Merritt, the man who shot and killed Ethan Walker, had his day in court and suggested that he didn't remember pulling the trigger. God damn, you had 2 years to come up with a defense, and that's the best you could do. At least R. Kelly tried the Shaggy defense and said it wasn't me. Pleading not guilty, he went to trial and got convicted of full-blown capital murder, landing him a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that's proper life. He ain't getting out and making no comeback album, even if he lives to be 100 years old. Then in August 2018, Ariana Barat also pleaded guilty to aggravated robbery and agreed to testify against her codies for a sentence of 25 years. And that same month, Sean Robinson, the guy that shot Zachary Belote, who didn't die, pled guilty to murder and ended up getting 40 years in prison. This was actually a pretty good result for him, considering the fact that it allowed him to avoid the more serious capital murder charge that could have got him the death penalty or life in jail without possibility of parole. In November 2018, Jalen Bell, aka Pimps, or Pimpy Z? It doesn't matter, he's irrelevant. Got 30 years after pleading guilty to aggravated robbery. This came after him turning down an offer to snitch on Tay-K for a reduced sentence of 20 years, which he duly rejected. An extra 10 years of eating good noodles, I guess. And so, Tay-K was the last person to be tried. Tay-K's trial started on July 16th, 2019. He rejected a plea deal and went with a not guilty plea. He pled guilty to 2 counts of aggravated robbery by threats and not guilty to capital murder, taking that charge to trial. This, in hindsight, was a pretty unusual and bad strategy, because copping guilty to any of these crimes and admitting that he was there to rob pretty heavily implicates him in the murder that took place in his presence. Tay-K's lawyer tried to argue that he didn't fire the lethal bullet and his job in the robbery was only to be there to find drugs to steal, making it very clear that he supposedly was not armed and had no idea that people would be shot.
The girls planned this. They set it up, and the boys were supposed to come in and hold everybody off, and Tay-K had a bag. It was going to get the money and the drugs from under the couch and run back out. Well, that's not what happened. Everything went tragically wrong in there. Because they have to prove that beyond any reasonable doubt that he should have known that that intentional killing would happen. Tamar never touched, handled, loaded, cleaned, carried a firearm either before this incident that day, during the incident that day, or after the incident that day.
Yeah, not sure if this guy's ever seen Tay-K's Instagram. And they also popped a nice little set of glasses on him as if that would help. Your Honor, this little nerdling, you clearly don't want no action. But the prosecution countered, saying that Tay-K clearly knew what he was getting into, considering the fact that he even asked if he could have his own gun before the robbery took place.
Yourself at that moment in time, as Tay-K is running inside that house with two guys armed with guns, and one of them armed with a set of brass knuckles, what his expectations were in that. He's already pled guilty to you today, saying, hey, I'm guilty that I knew that somebody was going to get threatened, but I'm not going to be guilty of a crime I didn't anticipate. That will be the testimony.
You know how he knew what was going to go down that night and what the risks were for his conspiracy? Because he wanted his own gun. As he asked Mariah Quadri, can I borrow a gun from you? Can you point me to somebody where I can borrow a gun?
And they even tried to prove his guilt further by showing his post-arrest interview where he cried in court.
This video from almost 3 years ago shows a 16-year-old Tamar McIntyre in a small room with police, uncomfortable, wiping his eyes at times, and finally admitting to investigators he played a role in a home invasion and murder in Mansfield.
Not a good look, Tay-K. Not a good look. He was eventually found guilty of the murder of Ethan Walker, as well as the guilty pleas for the aggravated robbery of Zachary Below.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Tamar McIntyre, guilty of the lesser included offense of murder.
Now, the reason he wasn't found guilty of full capital murder is because under Texas law, that is when the defendant intentionally commits the murder in the course of committing the aggravated robbery. So he's guilty of the murder because he was there with the intention to rob, which escalated into a murder that he participated in, but he's not guilty of the capital murder because he didn't go there with the intention of committing the murder. Now, prosecutors played the video of the race in court, but not as part of the trial, only for the jurors to consider as part of sentencing. So it's not surprising that they ended up giving him a hefty 55-year sentence for the murder, as well as 30 years for one of the aggravated robbery charges, and another 2 13-year sentences for other robbery charges. Because he was a juvenile when these offences were committed, he was allowed to serve these sentences concurrently, and he'll be eligible for parole in no less than 27.5 years. You know what that means, baby? New Tay-K album drop in summer 2046. I'm gonna be listening to that one in my Tesla Cybercopter. But really though, this whole thing is sad. I mean, he was only 16 when this thing went down. He went from playing Spider-Man to sharing a cell with a man named Spider. Following the conviction, a question mark hung over whether Tay-K would be able to keep any of the money he made from the race. He was sued in a civil suit worth over $1 million by the family of Ethan Walker for profiting from the murder. And apparently the record deal he signed whilst he was locked up with 88 Classic was worth over $600,000. With that in mind, who knows how much Jay Grand from 88 Classic made out of Tay-K? The lawsuit actually suggested that the label encouraged Tay-K to commit crimes to raise his profile, and even suggested that the reason he ran to New Jersey in particular was to be close to the label. Now don't get me wrong, I enjoyed The Race and other Tay-K songs. I don't think anybody's art should be destroyed or suppressed because of the things they've done. However, I do believe a lot of people profited from and encouraged some pretty reprehensible behaviour in this particular case. Now, I'm the last person that's going to lecture hip-hop on glorifying violence or people living the gangster lifestyle that they portray in their songs. We all enjoyed The Race because it was a good song with a crazy backstory written by a teenage killer. But that should never distract you from the human cost of a story like this. After the verdict, Ethan Walker's father made a heartfelt appeal to the courtroom, saying, "There are 3 people I hate: the planner, the person who pulled the trigger, and the person who profited off of this as a career move. Every free Tay-K t-shirt that was sold has my son's blood on it." Ethan Walker had a 3-year-old daughter, and his mother, who adopted him when he was only 7, recounted looking into the sweet face of Ethan Walker's 3-year-old daughter to tell her about the bad people that made her daddy go to heaven. She said that every time they looked up their son's case and saw Tay-K's song, they literally saw him dancing on Ethan's grave. And I agree, but the listeners aren't to blame. But let's keep it 100. Anybody that had a hand in directly profiting from The Race after Tay-K released it independently has blood on their hands. Jay Grand should be ashamed, and RCA should be ashamed. Sure, Tay-K's case captured the imagination of the hip-hop community, but we don't want another Tay-K. One was already too many, and I personally feel bad for Tay-K. Not because he got 55 years in jail, but because he was a young, misguided man, caught up in a dangerous life that was ultimately over before he'd even had an opportunity to start it. And seeing the dramatic moment that Pimps got sentenced was a good metaphor for this whole situation. He started out smiling and dicking around in the courtroom, and then caught the reality that he'd be spending 30 years in jail, followed by an emotional dressing down from Ethan Walker's mother that left Pimp's mother, who was watching in the courtroom, bursting into tears and leaving the room.
"I'm not going to wish you well with TBC. I'm not going to encourage you to study. I'm not going to encourage you to live your life. And that's your fault."
Nobody wins here. So if you've got to this point in the video, I just want you to remember that the most important thing about this story isn't Tay-K, it isn't The Race. The people who truly shouldn't be forgotten are the victims and their families. Because regardless of how responsible Tay-K or all of the people involved in these horrible crimes are, because what the families of the victims went through was made 1,000 times worse by The Race and everybody that watched it. And I hope that that and the people that suffered so much worse because of this song are remembered. Thanks for watching.
I've been robbed of seeing her graduate. I've been robbed of being a grandmother. I've been robbed. Thank God we believe in Jesus, and we have hope that we will one day see her again soon. When we leave this earth, we will be in heaven with her.